What's up, Fathom Church?
Fathom.
Welcome to the Going Deeper podcast. We are here. We're ready to talk about this. I'm your host, Kyle Knight. I'm here with Karina Bost. Hi, Karina.
Hello.
And you heard him already, Chris Martin.
Greetings.
Hello.
This is a serious podcast.
I'm glad we're upbeat about this one. Hey, we are talking this episode about pornography and maybe more specifically what is considered pornography. We did an episode on this podcast about pornography a long time ago, I think. So you can go back and listen to that. I think it's up there. But yeah, we wanted to kind of talk about maybe what is considered pornography. Karina, I'm going to throw this over to you because you had this idea.
Where'd it come from?
Start us off. Yeah. Where'd it come from?
So I have had several conversations over the last several months with Christian ladies who have expressed that they have no problem reading smutty novels or erotic novels. And this just caught me off guard. I found it very surprising. And so I thought the idea of like talking through this in the podcast might be really helpful for some ladies, but also defining what is porn might be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is a great topic for conversation, because as I talk with guys about this, I think some guys want to use technicalities to excuse poor behavior.
Yeah.
So it's not technically porn. It's, fill in the blank. It's not technically porn. It's just watching Game of Thrones. It's not technically porn. It's, when I was in high school, it's a Victoria's Secret catalog. It's not technically porn. It's just a novel. It's just a book. Yeah, sure. It's, erotica or whatever, but it's not porn. It's not porn. It's just that it's not technically porn. And I think we should, as Christians, be saying, well, what technically is porn? And is it okay? Is it somehow excusable to lust, which we would say that's a sin, and maybe even to act out on some of those fantasies and lusts in our brains and then into our bodies, just because it's, quote, not technically like I'm logging onto Pornhub or something like that, or I have a Playboy magazine or something like that. So yeah, I think this is absolutely an important conversation to have.
Yeah. So let's start with that. We know that, and I think this is a very important conversation because it is, it's different from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, when we were growing up, where now there's so many different types of pornography. But I think you're right, Chris. I think it comes down to how we view it and how we compare it and how we justify some of these things. So let's just start with there. Of Chris, you're opening up your Bible.
Yeah.
Can we start with the Bible?
I guess.
Let's start with what the text says.
I guess. So 1 Corinthians 6 is where my mind immediately goes. This is Paul's section. So remember, we preached on 1 Corinthians 5 years ago now. It's been that long. It's been a half a decade since we were in 1 Corinthians. But 1 Corinthians is Paul writing to a brand new church that has a lot of, just a lot of mess, a lot of immaturity, a lot of paganism, a lot of sin issues. And so, the church in Corinth is not like, oh, you guys are doing great. It's like, you're really a mess. And one section that he really digs into is sexual immorality. And so he says this in 1 Corinthians 6, verse 12. He says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Food is meant for the stomach and stomach for the food, and God will destroy both one and the other. The body is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And God raised the Lord, God raised the Lord and will also raise us up by his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For as it is written, the two shall become one flesh. But he who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that was just a big, long passage of text, but that word sexual immorality is used 2, 3, 4 times in that text. And the Greek word there, if I'm not mistaken, from when we taught it a number of years ago, is porneia.
Mm-hmm.
Porneia is that word. And it's where we get the term pornography. It's, that's where that obviously that's from. But it's translated in the ESV sexual immorality, and it's thrown around a lot in the New Testament. So this one is talking specifically about prostitution, which was a cult prostitution that they experienced in Corinth.
Mm-hmm.
But then he also uses this, Jesus uses this in Matthew 18:19 when he's talking about divorce. He says you cannot be divorced except for a reason of sexual immorality. And he is at that point referring to adultery.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of in there. So porneia is this junk drawer word in the Greek that really means any kind of sexual expression outside of the bounds of a covenantal monogamous marital relationship. So porneia is a big wide word, not a real narrow word. It covers a lot of ground. Yeah. And I think our idea of pornography probably should be considered similarly.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a big junk drawer word, not just magazines and websites,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a bigger spectrum, we might say, of pornography. And so that's kind of what I would like to propose is that pornography can mean a lot of different things. And even the same thing for two different people.
Mm-hmm.
For one, it might be porn. For others, it might not be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what
I
I wrote in my notes, that I was like, what is porn? And I wrote down that it's just something that creates or stirs up lustful desires within a person.
Yeah.
And that's where you're right. That's why it could be something for one person and something for not. But also it's incredibly dangerous because back when we did the other pornography podcast, I read the book, The Death of Porn by Ray Ortlund. And just in the entrance, he was talking about like the brothel of the mind, that you don't actually need anything because our imaginations are powerful enough to be pornography in and of themselves.
Wow.
So that's why this is important, and why it's more than just looking at things that can come from within us even. So
yeah, I think it's super important to start with that definition of what Scripture says, and thinking of it as kind of a junk drawer thing really actually helps. Because I think, and it wasn't just a long time ago, but I think we do get the sense of, pornography is one type of media and that's it. So if I am doing something else, it's not that, and therefore I'm fine with it. So can we like go through some of these different types and just kind of like, let's talk about them. We'll start with the pornographic videos and images. I think we could all kind of agree that is, I mean, I guess the normal when people think of pornography on the internet.
It's nude or sexually explicit images and videos that are produced with the intent of being pornography. That's what we would like. That's the traditional idea. The first definition. But then let's expand that.
Let's expand it.
Yeah.
The next one on mine is, I have Instagram on here, which you could say Instagram, social media, those kind of things. How does that also relate to even those videos?
Yeah, I mean, so any of us who's on social media, Instagram or otherwise, has opened up the browser or the, I don't know, For You page or the Explore page or whatever, and you're like, what is that?
Right.
Why is that there? Whether it's a picture or a video, and you don't have to go looking for it.
Yes.
It will find you. And they may have community guidelines that say, well, it can't be this or it can't be that. But can be pretty scantily clad men or women that are, let's be honest, they're there for pornographic reasons.
Mhm.
I don't know. So I would say absolutely it can be.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always have to be, but I think it can be.
Mhm.
And it comes back to your intent. Are
Mhm.
you looking at it as porn
Mhm.
or are you not?
Mhm.
Right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think about social media and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the interesting thing about social media is the algorithms are built to give you more of what you're looking at.
Right.
And so like if that's what you're looking at and you're like, well, it just keeps coming more and more and more. And it's like, well, the more and more you look at it, the more and more it will feed you. So
yeah, and I think it's important to also like understand that it doesn't need to be, Chris, like you said when we were talking about just almost like the traditional like videos and images of nude people, like that doesn't, like that comes up on social media, but like Instagram, especially if you're putting all these blockers on and stuff like that too, it's gonna continue to show you explicit things that like it's honestly what the world wants you to see and get your eyes on.
So maybe, I don't know, I'm fleshing this out in my mind as we're talking. So we might delete this from the podcast. You make it porn.
Mhm.
You're the one who makes it porn. What if we're saying porneia, sexual immorality?
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're the one who, now obviously there is some pornography that is created for that purpose, but you can pornography anything.
I
Mhm.
completely agree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Like you're the one who looks at the catalog
Mhm.
or looks at a billboard or watches a television program
Mhm.
and says, I'm pornographizing that person, that image, that video.
Mhm.
Whether its intent was to be created for pornography use or
Yeah.
not.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I feel like you do see that a lot on social media of even like I've read stories of like it's even like females who have just put up pictures of themselves, and again intent is something else. Maybe they wanted that attention or they were trying to do that, but just like normal pictures, and then like you see comments on things and everything like that, and you're right, it's people have turned that into, even if it's just a normal, not a sexually explicit image, they turn it into
Mhm.
pornography in their heads. They make it what they
Which is
want it
lust.
to be, which is
Mhm.
lust.
That's
yeah.
lust.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I would say,
Mm-hmm.
television programs or movies that
Right.
have nudity or even close to nudity, sex scenes, things like that. All of that can be pornography, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really interesting. I would like to turn to the written word,
Mhm.
because I think that's some of the genesis of this thought. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the fantasy aspect of pornography, not the visual aspect, but the emotional fantasy kind of mental aspect of
I think, could this also be like, people listen to those podcasts and that kind of stuff.
I'm
Like
sure
it's that kind of not visual.
Yeah,
like
it's
even
it's
reading
not I'm
and
looking at something, but I'm consuming
books
the
on tape too and
content
all that stuff. Yeah.
with an intent of
Mhm.
sexual engagement or arousal or whatever it might be.
Yep. And in a lot of ways that makes reading it or listening to it more dangerous, because you're creating emotional attachments. And I hear this, oh, no, I'm not, like, or it's just, no, I'm just feeding my attraction to my husband. And no, you're not. You are using a false thing
I'm warming
over
up
here.
the engine.
And you,
This is the worst
it
thing I've
doesn't,
ever heard.
it doesn't like copy
That
and
was-
paste. You can't say that and have it be true,
Yeah.
because you are using written word to create things
Right.
in you that are actually not your spouse creating that in you. It's different.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it dangerous, but also it creates this emotional attachment. And like we said earlier, your mind can go probably way darker places than even the text takes you.
Right.
Yeah, Chris, how do and both of you, how does emotions play into this? Like that's like, emotions can be like watching these videos and stuff like that, but again, that's way more like visual. But like when reading or just listening and when your imagination comes into it and your emotions get it, like what's the what do emotions play into this, and like how dangerous is that?
Okay, let's work through this real quick because I have an idea here that I'd like to again work through. This is by the way, church, we did not really plan this one out, so we're all over the place on this one. But let's think about this. Lust is the issue, sin-wise. Like porn itself is a stimulus for lust, but lust is the actual sin. Lust, we would say, is essentially sexual coveting, right? I mean, that's what we'd say lust is. It's coveting something that's not yours, desiring that or wanting that or wishing that you had that or upset that somebody else has what you don't have, but it's in a sexual nature, right? So that's sexual coveting. That's lust. So the question then towards emotions and towards kind of that stimuli, I once had an argument with somebody about this, but whether or not there was truly emotional porn, like that's not sexually based, but that emotively you start to covet and even lust for something you don't have. And I used this example, I don't know, 15 years ago. Let's see if it still plays out. The Notebook.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I don't know if I heard you use this example before, but I was
like,
literally thinking
not sexually explicit to my knowledge. I think I saw it once.
There's some aspects.
There's a little
but
bit
it's not just about that.
But I remember girls just losing their minds over the roommate. And it's actually a horrible, horrible premise for a movie. Like she leaves the guy that she's engaged to for this fling on a rowboat with a rainstorm. Like there's all this crazy stuff that's going on. There's thanks.
Is that it?
We are unhinged today. But there was this emotive lust.
Yeah.
Whether it's I'm not sure if it's lust or if it's just pure coveting, but either way, I think it's sinful. And I called it emotional porn, and I've had a couple of gals who were like, that's a bit too much. And I'm like, maybe, but what is it doing differently than pornography other than just making you wish you had something that you don't have, want something that you don't have, or compare some sort of unrealistic ideal with your reality and leaving you discontent. So I think that that's like one step removed from an erotic novel in some ways. Like a chick flick could be do we say a chick flick could be in the drawer of pornography? I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, and I think, honestly, I think chick flicks and The Notebook, and those were all just predecessors of the novels we have now. I think 10 years ago, it wasn't socially acceptable to read this kind of content, or it was like, oh, you're one off if that's what you're reading. But now it is socially acceptable.
Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey pushed it over the edge, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's a chick flick? No. That's softcore pornography.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think now, just because it's socially acceptable, that I think if it would have been that 10 years ago, it would have just been more like it is now.
It would have just been, oh, that's porn. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so... And I think that's just, you've pointed out like a huge difference between guys and gals. Like gals desire that emotional aspect. And this is just stereotyping. And I know that there's some crossover, but generally speaking, gals just desire that more emotionally than anything else.
Yeah. And I just think that's what really like TV movies and stuff like that, those ones that are PG and PG-13, like that's what it plays to now. It's like, it's that emotional, the relationship between this guy and girl, and then they leave, but they come back. And it's like, that's what gets people hooked.
To be really careful. I think we should just say this, be really careful. The fantasy realities that you fill your brain with. And I don't even think it has to be sexually explicit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, some people are going to be pissed at this, but like, be careful about Hallmark movies setting up some sort of ideal that's unattainable in reality. that will leave you discontent,
Right.
longing for something that is not true. I mean, that's what we talk about with porn stars and body image and all that stuff, just on an emotional level for people. Like, oh, there's some sort of world where like my fantasy, modern version of a Disney being swept off my feet, Prince Charming move that I think is emotionally dangerous. Whether that's lust or that's just pure coveting, it's certainly a dangerous place if all you're doing is just feeding that stuff to yourself without any sort of awareness or filter.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not saying, hey, Pornhub is the same as Hallmark. That'd be insane. Okay. But I am saying we got to be really wise with what we feed our minds.
It's a junk drawer. It really is like
it's a junk drawer.
There's so many different levels.
And it leads you to places that you don't want to go. Even that like heartwarming, oh, it's just so sweet. Yeah, but then you look at your husband and you're like, really? Sweatpants again? Like, I mean, at some level, it's like, hey, baby, you got this, Yeah. I mean, I just think it sets up a false standard of reality, which is what pornography does on the sexual front.
Yep.
So this is crazy stuff, man. This is like a deeper dive than it's easy to be like, I shouldn't look at porn. But it's a lot harder to say, I should really think about what I'm feeding my mind and what it's doing to my heart.
Well, and Karina, let me get just one last thing from you of this, since I think the big topic of this one was kind of those erotic novels, that different type of media of porn, and that you've heard it from, it's a common thing amongst some females. What would you say to some of these females who say like, hey, I do this, and maybe they're like, it's fine, or they're like, ooh, like questioning, should I be doing this? Like, from another female, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I just would challenge you that this is serious. I spent a lot of time in 1 Thessalonians this month for some reason. And so this verse kept coming up, 1 Thessalonians 4, 3-5 and 7-8. God's will is for you to be holy. So stay away from all sexual sin. Then each of you will control his own body and live in holiness and honor, not in lustful passion like the pagans who do not know God and his ways. God has called us to live holy lives, not impure lives. Therefore, anyone who refuses to live by these rules is not disobeying human teaching, but is rejecting God, who gives us the Holy Spirit. So I just challenge you. It is serious. To act like our sin is not sin is rejecting the Spirit that God gives us. So that went real deep, real fast.
It's a mic drop of a verse, though.
I don't think we need to say anything else. I mean, seriously. I think that's awesome. I think that's exact. It's keeping our head on a swivel, being aware, not being like the pagans, not being just whatever. Like, it's not that big a deal. No, it's a big deal. It's not innocuous. It's actually doing something to you.
Yep.
Yeah. And we live in 2024 now, where it's not just one thing out there that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, it is a pornified world that we live in, and that makes it dangerous. And yet Christ has given us more than enough to be able to handle it. But we gotta discipline ourselves on some stuff.
Yep. Yeah, that's at the end of 1 Thessalonians, end of chapter 5. It does say God enables you to do the things he's called you to do, but not if you're rejecting the Spirit.
Yeah, that's right.
Does the work in you.
It's good stuff. That's good stuff. Hey, great podcast.
Good job, you guys.
We got through it. Yeah, thank you guys for this topic of conversation, this discussion. Hey, again, especially with this stuff, if you have questions about this, if you are struggling with something, please come talk to one of us on staff, a pastor, an elder, whoever. Talk to people about this. Thank you, church, for listening. We love you, and we'll catch you next time.